So this week we're going to be looking at the end of the text of the Gospel of Mark. So after this week we're going to have 3 more weeks where we look back at the Gospel of Mark and talk about some main themes that emerge out of Mark based on celebrate, connect, and contribute. So that's what's going to be coming the next 3 weeks. This last week we're going to be looking at the very end of chapter 15 and then verse 16. So one way of leading off your group might be to ask about last week's message. So Jared taught about the idea of Jesus' death on the cross as the first part of the good news. And of course, the resurrection now is going to be the second part of the good news. But the whole Gospel of Mark is a call to us to live differently in light of the good news of what Jesus has done for us. Jesus has been telling us that we're supposed to pick up our cross and follow him. So now as we've seen him on the cross, one good question would be to ask people in your group, so this past week, has meditating on Jesus' sacrifice for you changed anything? Has it impacted your relationship with God? Has it led you to be more eager to serve others because of what Jesus has already done for you? Well, this week we get to talk about part 2 of the good news, the resurrection. And the story is going to begin with Joseph of Arimathea being willing to take some risks by going to Pilate and asking for Jesus' body, some expense in giving him a burial that would be very atypical for someone who had just been crucified. I mean, normally the bodies would sort of be thrown in a scrap heap, but instead Jesus is going to be given a very honoring burial by Joseph. But we don't get any sense either from Joseph of Arimathea or from the women who are going to honor Jesus on that first Easter morning that any of them are really expecting Jesus to rise from the dead, despite the fact that over and over again Jesus had said, "I'm going to die, and on the third day I'll be resurrected." Everyone is shocked and amazed by what happens. No one sees this coming. In fact, that's actually part of what adds to the credibility of the story. And there's all kinds of details in this story. Someone who was just trying to convince other people with something they made up would never have told the story this way, with women as the witnesses and various other kinds of details. One question that may come up in your group has to do with the fact that there's these extra verses after about verse 11 that are kind of set off in the main text. Some of your Bibles might even just put them in a whole footnote or something like that. We would agree as an elder team with what basically all Bible scholars now pretty much will say, which is that those later verses are not part of what Mark actually wrote. So in our preaching of the text, we're going to stick with the first part of chapter 16 as the end point. And there's, Jeff will talk a little bit in the sermon about some of the different theories. Basically, it comes down to this. Either there was a longer original ending, and the papyrus or something was ripped. It was damaged in some way, so we don't have like the last page. Or this is simply where Mark wanted to end his gospel. Now, whichever of those theories you come down on, the reality is that God in his sovereignty wanted us to have this version of the Gospel of Mark, right? So either way, it's not going to change how we interpret it that much. But Jeff's going to argue that he really thinks this is exactly how Mark wanted it to end, and in part because Mark is wanting to force us to confront a question. The women at the end of the story are told that Jesus is risen. They can see the empty tomb. They haven't yet seen Jesus himself yet, but they have a choice. Are they going to believe, or are they not going to believe? And in many ways, we face exactly that same choice now. The tomb is still just as empty as it was then, but we don't get the physical opportunity to see Jesus in this life. But we also hear the proclamation from others, Jesus was raised from the dead. He is alive. He is not dead. And that this is a hope for us. I mean, it's interesting that Peter is specifically mentioned as someone who needs to be told about the resurrection. Peter, who has denied Jesus, who is wondering if his hope is completely destroyed, is singled out, I think, as a signal for all of us that the resurrection is hope for broken, sinful people, that they can have new life if they will put their faith in Jesus. And so all of us, whether we're Christians for a long time, or maybe there's people in your groups who've never given their lives to Christ, really confronting this question, what are you going to do in response to this proclamation that Jesus is risen? That's going to be one of our main themes